The rain fell like needles that February night, each drop a cold reminder that the world could be merciless. Through the downpour, two small figures moved across the street toward the glowing palace of light and warmth that was the Williams Theater. Their soaked clothes clung to skeletal frames, their tangled black hair dripped with icy water, and their bare feet, visible through shoes more holes than leather, left wet prints on the pavement. Helen Harper gripped her twin sister's frozen hand tighter. "Christine, we have to try. We have to go in there." Christine's lips had turned a frightening shade of blue-purple. "Catherine, I can't feel my hands anymore. Everything hurts so much. I'm so hungry it feels like something is eating me from the inside." Catherine was only 10 minutes older than her sister, but in that moment, she felt ancient. "Please, Christine, stay with me. Don't close your eyes. We're going to make it through this night. I promise." The wind howled around them as if laughing at their desperation. Across the rain-slicked street, the Williams Theater blazed with golden light. Through the tall glass doors, Catherine could see people dressed in silks and furs, diamonds catching the chandelier light and throwing rainbows across marble floors. Beautiful piano music floated out into the cruel night, each note a whisper of a world the twins would never belong to. But what choice did they have? It had been 2 days since they'd eaten anything, 2 days of searching through garbage bins, of being chased away from doorways, of watching their reflections grow thinner in shop windows. Tonight something had to change or they wouldn't survive to see morning. "That music," Christine whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "It sounds like when Mama used to sing to us." "Look at them," Christine whispered. "They're like people from a story. Like they're not even real." More beautiful people emerged from arriving cars, laughing and talking as they disappeared into the warm, bright theater. Through the open doors, Catherine glimpsed golden walls, huge paintings in fancy frames, and a crystal chandelier hanging like a frozen waterfall. The piano music continued to flow out into the cold night, each note calling to Catherine and Christine, reminding them of their mother's love, of the dreams they'd once dared to dream. "Catherine," Christine said, her voice barely a whisper now, "what if they laugh at us? What if they're mean?" "Then we'll leave," Catherine said, trying to sound brave. "But at least we'll know we tried." She took her sister's icy hand in hers. Both were shaking from cold, from fear, from the hunger that made the world spin. "Ready?" Christine took a deep, shaky breath. "Ready." Together, the two girls stepped off the curb. A car honked and they jumped back, hearts pounding. But then they tried again, moving faster this time, half running across the wet pavement. The rain seemed to fall even harder, as if the sky itself wanted to stop them. Water splashed up from puddles, soaking their already drenched legs. The wind pushed against them like invisible hands trying to shove them back into the darkness where they belonged. But Catherine kept pulling Christine forward, and Christine kept following, trusting her sister with everything she had. They reached the other side and stood at the bottom of the red carpet that led to the theater entrance. The carpet was protected by a fancy awning, completely dry amid the storm, the only dry spot on the entire street. A massive security guard stood at the entrance, arms crossed over his chest, face hard and unfriendly. His job was to keep the wrong kind of people out. People exactly like Catherine and Christine. Before he could say anything, 4 elegantly dressed people emerged from the theater, their voices loud with wine-soaked enthusiasm. "Desmond Jackson was absolutely magnificent tonight," one woman gushed. "The way he played that piano, it was like magic." "Pure magic indeed," agreed one of the men. "Jackson is a true master, the greatest pianist in the whole country." "And Madame Esther's performance," the other woman added, clutching her chest dramatically. Her voice could move stones to tears. The 4 walked right past Catherine and Christine as if the girls were invisible, as if they were less than the rain-soaked air itself. They climbed into a waiting car and drove off into the night, still laughing about the wonderful music they'd heard. Catherine felt something twist inside her chest. These people had just experienced the most famous musicians in the city while sitting warm and comfortable and fed. Now they would return to soft beds and hot meals. Meanwhile, she and Christine stood in the freezing rain, starving, about to beg for scraps. But there was no time for self-pity. The security guard had noticed them now. His eyes narrowed, his face hardened further. Catherine knew that look. She'd seen it 100 times. It said, "You don't belong here. Get away from me." But Catherine refused to run. Not this time. Not when Christine's lips were turning blue and her sister could barely stand. She pulled Christine forward, and together they stepped onto the red carpet. It felt strange under their feet, soft and dry and expensive. For just a moment they were out of the rain. For just a moment they could pretend they belonged. "Hey," the security guard's voice cut through the air like a whip. "What do you think you're doing? Get off that carpet right now. This is a private theater for paying customers only." Catherine's heart hammered so hard she thought it might explode. Her mouth felt dry. Her legs felt like water. Every instinct screamed at her to run and hide. But she thought about Christine, about her sister's frozen hands and empty stomach. She thought about their mother, about the promise she'd made to always protect Christine no matter what. She thought about the music floating from the theater, music that sounded like hope, and she opened her mouth to speak. "Please, sir," Catherine said, her voice shaking but determined. "We don't want to cause any trouble. We just want to ask if we can sing for the people inside. Me and my sister, we can sing really well. Our mama taught us. If we could just sing one song, maybe play the piano." "Are you crazy?" The security guard's voice dripped with disgust. "Look at you. You're filthy. You smell. You think anyone in there wants to see or hear homeless kids? This is the Williams Theater, not a charity house for street rats." Each word stung, but Catherine didn't move. She kept standing there, kept holding her sister's hand, kept hoping against hope. "Sir, please." Catherine tried again, her voice breaking now. "We're so hungry. We haven't eaten in 2 days. If we could just sing in exchange for some food, even old bread that you're going to throw away anyway, we would be so grateful. Please." The security guard's face turned redder. He looked around, checking if any important people were watching. Then he grabbed Catherine's shoulder with a rough hand and started pushing both girls back toward the street. "Get out of here before I call the police," he snarled. "You're making this place look bad. Go on, get." He shoved them hard. Catherine stumbled, almost falling. She caught Christine before her sister could hit the ground, and they both staggered backward off the red carpet and back into the pouring rain. The security guard brushed off his uniform as if touching them had contaminated him. Then he turned and walked back to his post, muttering under his breath. Catherine and Christine stood there in the rain, soaking wet again, shivering harder than before. Christine was crying harder now, her small body shaking with sobs. "I told you," she whispered through her tears. "I told you they wouldn't help us. Nobody ever helps us." Catherine felt her own tears start to come, hot against her cold cheeks. Christine was right. Nobody ever helped them. The world had decided that 2 homeless girls didn't matter, didn't deserve kindness, didn't deserve to live. But then, through the fog of despair, Catherine saw something. Along the side of the theater there was a smaller door partially hidden behind some bushes. It was slightly open. A worker came out carrying a trash bag, and when he went back inside the door didn't close all the way. Catherine's heart started beating faster, but this time not from fear, from possibility. "Christine," she whispered, pulling her sister close. "Look, that door, it's open." Christine followed her gaze and her eyes went wide. "Catherine, no, we can't. That's even worse than going through the front. If they catch us sneaking in, if we don't try, we'll freeze to death out here," Catherine said firmly. She cupped her sister's face with both hands, making Christine look at her. "Listen to me. Mommy used to say that our voices were special, that our music could touch people's hearts. Maybe if we can just get inside, if we can just get someone to actually hear us sing, they'll understand. They'll help us." Christine looked doubtful, but she was too weak and too cold to argue anymore. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, we'll try." Catherine took one more look at the security guard. He was facing away from them, watching the front entrance for more important guests. "Now," Catherine whispered. Hand in hand, the 2 girls ran across the wet pavement to the side of the building. They ducked behind the bushes, their hearts pounding so loud they were sure someone would hear. But no one came. No one shouted. No one saw them. Catherine pushed the side door open a little more. Warm air rushed out, embracing their frozen faces like the answer to a prayer. Inside, she could hear voices, footsteps, the sound of instruments being tuned. She could also hear that piano music, much louder now, coming from somewhere deeper in the building. "Come on," Catherine whispered to Christine. And together, scared but desperate, the 2 homeless girls slipped inside the Williams Theater, the warmth wrapped around them like their mother's arms. For a few seconds, Catherine and Christine just stood there, feeling heat sink into their frozen skin. It felt so good it almost hurt. They were in a narrow hallway with plain white walls, nothing fancy like the golden lobby they'd glimpsed through the front doors. This was clearly where workers moved, not where rich people walked. The hallway was empty, but Catherine could hear voices and footsteps coming from somewhere nearby. They had to move quickly before someone found them. "This way," Catherine whispered, pulling Christine deeper into the hallway. They crept forward, staying close to the wall, ready to hide if anyone appeared. Their wet shoes made soft squeaking sounds with every step. Catherine worried the sounds would give them away, but the noise from elsewhere in the theater was loud enough to cover their movements. As they moved forward, the hallway opened into a wider area, and Catherine's breath caught. They had reached backstage. The space was enormous, filled with organized chaos. Workers in black clothes rushed back and forth, carrying music stands, chairs, and heavy equipment. Some spoke into headsets, coordinating with people Catherine couldn't see. Thick black curtains hung everywhere, creating movable walls. Ropes and cables snaked across the floor. Tall metal structures held lights that could probably shine brighter than the sun. And everywhere, stacked against walls, sitting on wheeled platforms, leaning in corners, were instruments. Violins in their cases, a huge golden harp wrapped in protective cloth, drums of all sizes, brass instruments that gleamed under the backstage lights. But what really made Catherine's heart skip was what she saw in the center of all this activity. A piano. Not just any piano. A grand piano, black and shiny, so beautiful it looked carved from polished midnight. It sat on a wheeled platform, ready to be rolled onto the stage. A man in coveralls was bent over it, carefully tuning the strings inside. Catherine stared at that piano like it was the answer to all her prayers. She remembered the old broken piano in the abandoned warehouse where she and Christine used to practice. That piano had been missing keys and made strange buzzing sounds, but the girls had loved it anyway. They'd spent hours there playing the songs their mother had taught them, pretending they were real musicians performing for real audiences. Then one day the warehouse was torn down and their piano was destroyed. They hadn't touched a real piano since. "Catherine, look," Christine whispered, pointing through a gap in the curtains. The girls could see the stage itself. It was massive, the wood floor gleaming like glass. Giant lights hung from the ceiling, ready to illuminate everything below. And beyond the stage, through another gap in a different curtain, Catherine could see the audience. Row after row of red velvet seats stretched back into the darkness, and almost every seat was filled with well-dressed people. They sat talking quietly to each other, reading programs, checking their watches, waiting for the show to begin. Catherine felt her courage start to crumble. There were so many people, hundreds of them, and all of them were rich and important, wearing clothes that probably represented more money than Catherine and Christine had seen in their entire lives. "Catherine, I'm scared," Christine whispered, pressing close to her sister. "There are so many of them. What if they all laugh at us?" Catherine was scared too, terrified. But she was also so hungry it felt like her stomach was trying to consume itself from the inside. And Christine looked so weak that Catherine worried her sister might actually collapse. "We've come this far," Catherine whispered back. "We can't give up now." A voice suddenly shouted nearby, making both girls jump. 5 minutes to curtain. 5 minutes. Where's Jackson? Someone find Jackson." Workers began moving even faster, their movements more urgent. The man who'd been tuning the piano closed the lid and rolled the platform toward the stage. Other workers grabbed chairs and music stands, carrying them out onto the stage in precise positions. Catherine grabbed Christine's hand and pulled her behind a tall stack of equipment boxes. They crouched down, making themselves as small as possible. From their hiding spot, they watched as the backstage area slowly emptied. Workers disappeared into the wings, the sides of the stage hidden from the audience. The chaotic energy settled into a tense, waiting silence. Then Catherine heard footsteps, not the quick, practical steps of workers. These were slower, more confident. The steps of someone important. A man walked into view, and even from their hiding spot, Catherine could tell he was someone special. He was tall and wore a black suit that fit him perfectly. His dark hair was slicked back, and his face was handsome but hard, with sharp features and cold eyes. He walked with his chin up, like he owned the world. "That's him," Christine breathed. "That's Desmond Jackson." Catherine had heard the name before. Everyone had. Desmond Jackson was the most famous pianist in the city, maybe in the whole country. People said he could make a piano sing, cry, and laugh all in one performance. They said his concerts sold out months in advance and that rich people paid enormous sums just to hear him play. Following behind Jackson was a woman in a long, flowing red dress that sparkled like it was covered in rubies. Her blonde hair was piled high on her head in an elegant style, and her makeup made her look like a painting. She moved with grace and confidence, her head held high. "Madame Esther," Christine whispered, "the famous singer." Catherine had heard her voice once, drifting from a store's radio. It had been beautiful, strong and clear, hitting notes that seemed impossible for a human voice to reach. Jackson and Madame Esther stood together in the wing, preparing to go on stage. A young woman with a headset approached them nervously. "Mr. Jackson, Madame Esther, the audience is ready. We'll begin in 2 minutes." Jackson waved his hand dismissively. Yes, I know the schedule. Go." The young woman hurried away. Jackson turned to Madame Esther with a smirk. "Another performance for these wealthy fools who wouldn't know real music if it bit them. But they pay well, so we smile and play." Madame Esther laughed, a cold tinkling sound. "They'll throw their money at us either way. Though I must say, Williams pays better than most. I suppose that's why we tolerate his little theater." "Indeed," Jackson said. "Shall we give them something to talk about at their dinner parties?" "Always, darling. Always." Catherine watched them with a sinking feeling. These people didn't seem kind. They seemed proud and cold and cruel. Would they really help 2 homeless girls? But before she could think about it more, the lights in the theater changed. The backstage area grew darker while the stage lights came up bright and beautiful. Music began to play as the orchestra took their positions, warming up with quick scales and runs. Then a voice boomed out over speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Williams Theater is proud to present tonight's performance featuring the incomparable Desmond Jackson on piano and the magnificent Madame Esther, accompanied by the City Symphony Orchestra." The audience burst into applause, the sound washing over everything like a wave. Jackson and Madame Esther walked onto the stage smiling and waving. The applause grew louder. People stood up, clapping harder, showing their appreciation before the performance had even begun. Catherine watched through the gap in the curtain as Jackson sat at the beautiful piano. He adjusted the bench, stretched his fingers, and placed his hands on the keys with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Then he began to play. The music that poured from that piano was unlike anything Catherine had ever heard. It wasn't just sound, it was emotion made real. The notes danced and leaped, whispered and roared. Jackson's fingers flew across the keys so fast they were almost a blur. The audience sat in complete silence, mesmerized. Then Madame Esther began to sing, and her voice joined the piano in perfect harmony. Her voice soared above the music, clear and powerful, hitting notes that made Catherine's skin tingle. Christine clutched Catherine's arm. "They're so good," she whispered, and Catherine could hear the hopelessness in her sister's voice. "How can we possibly compare to that? We're just kids who learn from Mama. We don't have training. We don't have fancy clothes. We don't have anything." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes because Christine was right. They were nothing compared to these professionals. Who were they to think they could stand on that stage? But then Catherine remembered something. She remembered lying in their mother's arms, cold and hungry even back then, listening to Mama sing. Mama's voice hadn't been trained like Madame Esther's. It hadn't been perfect, but it had been full of love, full of warmth, full of hope. And Mama had always said that music wasn't about being perfect. It was about being honest. It was about touching hearts. "Christine," Catherine whispered, "we may not be as good as them, but we have something they don't have." "What?" Christine asked. "We're singing because we have to, because it's life or death. That means something." Christine looked at her sister with wide eyes, then slowly nodded. The performance continued. Jackson's hands flew across the keys. Madame Esther's voice filled every corner of the theater. The orchestra played behind them, adding layers of sound that made the whole thing feel magical. Finally, after what felt like both forever and no time at all, the music ended with a powerful final chord that seemed to shake the building. Silence. Then the audience exploded with applause. People jumped to their feet, clapping and cheering and shouting, "Bravo!" Flowers were thrown onto the stage. Jackson and Madame Esther bowed deeply, smiling and waving, soaking up the praise. Catherine watched all of this, her heart pounding. The performance was over. Now was her chance. If she was going to do this, if she was going to ask for help, she had to do it now, while everyone was still on stage, while there was still an audience to hear them. But how could she get Jackson's attention? Then she saw it. The orchestra members were standing from their chairs, taking their bows. Some were already starting to walk off stage. In the chaos of curtain calls and congratulations, no one was paying attention to the wings anymore. "Christine," Catherine whispered urgently, "we're going out there." Christine's eyes went huge. "What?" "Catherine, no. We can't just walk onto the stage. We have to. It's our only chance." Catherine grabbed her sister's hand. "Trust me, please." Christine looked terrified, but she nodded. The 2 girls crept out from behind the equipment boxes. Their hearts hammered in their chests. Their legs felt like water. but they kept moving forward step by step, getting closer to the bright lights of the stage. They reached the wing where they could see everything. The stage, the audience, Jackson and Madame Esther still bowing and basking in applause. Catherine took a deep breath. This was it. There was no turning back now. She stepped out of the shadows and onto the stage. The bright light struck Catherine like a wave, blinding her for a moment. She squinted, trying to see, her hands still gripping Christine's tightly as she pulled her sister forward. The stage felt enormous under her feet, the polished wood seeming to stretch on forever. And beyond the lights, she could sense the audience. Hundreds of eyes, all focused on the stage. At first, no one noticed them. The applause was still thundering. Jackson and Madame Esther were still waving and smiling. Orchestra members were gathering their instruments and leaving the stage. But then someone saw them. A violin player stopped mid-step, his mouth falling open. He pointed at the two small dirty girls who had appeared from nowhere. Another musician turned to look, then another. Like dominoes falling, heads turned one by one until everyone on stage was staring at Catherine and Christine. The applause from the audience began to fade, replaced by confused murmuring. People were standing up in their seats, craning their necks to see what was happening. Desmond Jackson turned around, his smile vanishing instantly. His eyes landed on the two girls and his face twisted with disgust and anger. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice sharp and cold. "Who are these street children? Security!" Madame Esther gasped dramatically, putting her hand to her chest as if she might faint. "Good heavens! How did they get in here? They're filthy, absolutely filthy." Catherine felt her face burn with shame. She was suddenly aware of how she must look. Hair tangled and dripping, clothes torn and soaking wet, shoes with holes that showed her dirty toes. Christine was shaking beside her, trying to hide behind Catherine's shoulder. Workers began rushing onto the stage from both wings, their faces angry and alarmed. The security guard from the front entrance appeared, his face bright red with fury. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jackson," he shouted, running toward the girls. "I threw them out earlier. I don't know how they got back in." Catherine knew she only had seconds before they were dragged away. She had to speak now. She had to say something before it was too late. She opened her mouth, her voice coming out small and shaky but somehow carrying across the silent theater. "Please, sir." Everyone froze. The workers stopped running. The audience leaned forward in their seats. Even Jackson paused, looking at Catherine with cold, cruel eyes. Catherine swallowed hard and continued, her voice trembling but determined. "Please, sir, if we sing and play the piano for you, will you give us some food, even just old bread?" For a moment there was complete silence. Catherine could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She could feel Christine's hand squeezing hers so tight it hurt. Then someone in the audience laughed. It was a short, sharp laugh that cut through the silence like a knife. Then another person laughed, and another. Soon laughter was rippling through the entire audience. Cruel, mocking laughter that made Catherine's stomach twist into knots. Jackson's lips curled into a nasty smile. "Did you hear that?" he called out to the audience, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "These little beggars want to entertain us. They think they can sing and play piano." He turned back to Catherine, his eyes gleaming with mean amusement. "Tell me, child, where exactly did you train? The Juilliard School of Garbage Dumps?" The audience roared with laughter. Even some of the orchestra members were chuckling, shaking their heads at the absurdity. Madame Esther stepped forward, circling the girls like a hawk examining prey. "My dear children," she said in a sickeningly sweet voice that was clearly fake, "do you have any idea where you are? This is the Williams Theater. We have just performed Rachmaninoff, Chopin, and Debussy. We are professionals who have trained for decades." She wrinkled her nose. What could two dirty little street rats possibly offer us? More laughter. Louder this time. Catherine felt tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She couldn't cry. Not now, not in front of all these people. Christine was crying, though, silent tears streaming down her face. She tried to pull her hand away from Catherine's, tried to run back to the shadows, but Catherine held on tight. We can sing," Catherine said, her voice cracking. "Our mama taught us. She said we had special voices." "Your mama?" Jackson interrupted, his voice full of mockery. "Let me guess. Your mama was some drunk singing in bars? Or maybe she howled at the moon? Is that where you learned your special voices?" The audience laughed even harder. If you're still watching up to now, type "I'm still here" in the comments section and tell us your view. Catherine felt like she was being stabbed with every laugh, every mocking voice, every cruel word. But something inside her refused to break. Maybe it was hunger making her too weak to run. Maybe it was desperation making her too stubborn to quit. Or maybe it was the memory of her mother's voice singing to them on cold nights, promising them that they were special, that they mattered. "Our mama was Helen," Catherine said loudly, speaking over the laughter. "Helen Harper, and yes, she taught us to sing. She died 5 years ago, and we've been alone ever since. We're hungry and cold, and we just want a chance to earn some food. That's all we're asking for." The laughter died down a little. Some people in the audience looked uncomfortable now, shifting in their seats. A few women whispered to each other, their faces troubled. But Jackson just smiled wider, sensing an opportunity for even more entertainment. "How touching," he said, putting his hand over his heart in a mocking gesture. "A tragic story. Ladies and gentlemen, we have street urchins with a sob story." He turned to the audience, spreading his arms wide. "What do you say? Should we give these children a chance to perform? Shall we see what the gutter has taught them about music?" "Yes," someone in the audience shouted. "Let's see. This should be amusing." "It'll be like watching trained monkeys," another voice called out, causing another wave of laughter. Jackson turned back to Catherine, his smile turning cruel. "Very well. You want to perform? You shall perform. And afterward, if you manage not to embarrass yourselves completely, I'll personally ensure you receive—" He paused dramatically. "A grand banquet. The finest bread our kitchen has to offer. Perhaps even some cheese if you're very, very good." The audience laughed and applauded at his cruel joke. They thought this was wonderful entertainment, watching homeless children humiliate themselves. Catherine felt Christine trembling violently beside her. Her sister was terrified, ready to run, ready to give up. But Catherine looked at the piano sitting on the stage, the beautiful, perfect piano. She thought about all those times she and Christine had practiced on that broken instrument in the warehouse. All those songs Mama had taught them. All those nights they'd sung together to keep each other warm. This was their chance, maybe their only chance. Yes, these people were laughing at them. Yes, Jackson was being cruel. But if they could just play, just sing, maybe, just maybe, someone would hear the truth in their music. "Okay," Catherine said, her voice steady now. "We'll perform." Jackson's eyebrows shot up. He hadn't expected her to agree. For a moment he looked almost impressed by her courage. Then his cruel smile returned. "Excellent. This is going to be entertaining." He gestured grandly toward the piano. "Please, young maestros, take your positions." Workers moved aside, creating a path to the piano. The audience settled into their seats, programs rustling, people whispering excitedly to each other about the unexpected show. Catherine walked toward the piano, Christine following on shaky legs. Each step felt like walking through deep water. The stage lights seemed to get brighter and hotter. Catherine could feel sweat mixing with the rainwater on her skin. They reached the piano. Catherine looked at the keys, so clean and white they seemed to glow. She was afraid to touch them with her dirty hands, afraid she would somehow break this beautiful instrument. Behind them, someone in the audience yelled out, "Get on with it, let's see this disaster." More laughter. Jackson stood to the side, his arms crossed, his face smug and expectant. Madame Esther stood beside him, a nasty smile on her red lips. The orchestra members watched with expressions ranging from pity to amusement. Catherine sat down on the piano bench. It was smooth and comfortable, so different from the wobbly crate they'd used to sit on at the warehouse. Christine stood beside her, her whole body shaking. "What song?" Christine whispered, her voice so quiet Catherine barely heard it. Catherine thought about it. What song could they sing? What song would show these cruel people that they were wrong, that homeless children could be talented too, that they deserved kindness and help? Then she knew. There was only one song. The song Mama used to sing to them every night. The song that had kept them alive through 5 years of suffering. "Mama's Lullaby," Catherine whispered back. Christine's eyes widened. She nodded slowly. Catherine placed her hands on the piano keys. They felt cool and smooth under her fingers. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. The audience watched, some still chuckling, some looking bored, all of them expecting failure. Jackson leaned over and whispered something to Madame Esther. They both laughed quietly. Catherine closed her eyes. She thought about Mama. She thought about those cold nights when Mama would hold them and sing, her voice warm and full of love. She thought about the promise she'd made to Mama on the night she died, to take care of Christine, to never give up, to remember that they were special. And then, just as Catherine was about to press the first key, something happened. A man from the audience stood up. He was holding something in his hand, a bottle of water. Before anyone could stop him, he threw it toward the stage. The bottle flew through the air in slow motion, spinning and catching the light. It struck Catherine square in the chest. Water exploded everywhere, soaking her already wet clothes even more, splashing onto Christine, spraying across the piano keys. The audience erupted in laughter, the loudest, cruelest laughter yet. People were doubled over, holding their stomachs. Some were pointing at the girls and laughing so hard they could barely breathe. "Bullseye," someone shouted. "That's what you get for thinking. You belong here." Another voice called out. Catherine sat frozen on the piano bench, water dripping from her hair, from her nose, from her chin. The cold plastic bottle had struck her hard enough to hurt, leaving a painful spot on her chest. Christine was crying openly now, her hands covering her face, her small shoulders shaking with sobs. Jackson was laughing too, not even trying to hide it. "Oh my, this is better than I expected. The street children are getting a bath. How delightful." Madame Esther was practically cackling, her elegant composure completely gone. They looked like drowned rats. Absolutely pathetic. Catherine felt something break inside her. Not her courage, that was already broken, not her hope, that had died the moment the bottle struck her. Something deeper broke, something that had been holding her together through 5 years of suffering and pain and rejection. She looked down at her wet hands, at the water pooling on the perfect white keys of the piano. She had ruined it. She had gotten this beautiful instrument wet with her dirty water. "Sorry, Mama," Catherine whispered so quietly no one could hear over the laughter. "I'm sorry. I tried. I really tried." Then, cutting through the laughter like a knife through silk, a voice boomed across the theater. "What's going on here?" The laughter stopped instantly. Every head in the theater turned toward the back of the auditorium. A man was striding down the center aisle, his footsteps echoing loudly in the sudden silence. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive gray suit that fit him perfectly. His hair was dark with streaks of silver at the temples. His face was strong and handsome, but right now it was twisted with anger. Catherine had never seen this man before, but somehow she knew exactly who he was. Everyone in the theater seemed to know. People were sitting up straighter in their seats, smoothing their clothes, looking nervous. This was Lucas Williams, the owner of the theater, the most powerful man in the building. Lucas Williams walked down the aisle like a storm gathering strength. His eyes were fixed on the stage, sweeping across Jackson, Madame Esther, the orchestra members, and finally landing on Catherine and Christine. When he saw the two girls, soaking wet, shivering, terrified, his face changed. The anger shifted into something else, something that looked almost like shock. He stopped walking for just a moment, staring at them. His eyes moved from their faces to their black hair to their deep brown eyes, and something flickered across his expression. Recognition? Confusion? Then he continued forward, reaching the front of the theater and climbing the steps to the stage in 3 powerful strides. Everyone backed away from him as if he were made of fire. "Mr. Williams," Jackson said, his voice suddenly smooth and respectful, all traces of his cruel mockery gone. "Sir, I can explain. These children snuck into the theater and—" "Be quiet," Lucas said, his voice low and dangerous. Jackson's mouth snapped shut. Lucas walked toward the girls and they shrank back, expecting him to yell at them, to grab them, to throw them out just like everyone else had tried to do. But he didn't. Instead, without saying a word, without any hesitation at all, Lucas took off his expensive suit jacket and draped it over both girls. The jacket was warm from his body heat, and it was so large that it wrapped around both of them like a blanket, shielding them from the cold that had been biting at their skin. Catherine felt the warmth sink into her frozen body, and she almost cried from the shock of it. When was the last time someone had done something kind for them? When was the last time an adult had looked at them and seen children instead of pests to be chased away? "What are your names?" Lucas asked gently, kneeling down so he was at eye level with them. His voice was soft now, completely different from the commanding tone he'd used with Jackson. Catherine's throat felt tight. She tried to speak but couldn't get the words out. "I'm Christine," Christine whispered, "and this is my sister Catherine." "Christine and Catherine," Lucas repeated softly, looking at them carefully. His eyes lingered on their faces like he was trying to memorize every detail. "How old are you?" 10, Catherine managed to say. "We're twins." Lucas nodded slowly, his expression troubled. "And where are your parents? Where do you live?" Catherine felt her chest tighten. This was always the hardest question to answer. "We don't have parents anymore," she said quietly. And we don't live anywhere. We're homeless." Lucas's face grew even more pained. "What happened to your parents?" "We never knew our father," Christine said, her voice small and sad. "Mama never talked about him. She said he didn't know about us." "And your mother?" Lucas asked gently. Catherine felt tears burning in her eyes again. "She died 5 years ago. On a cold night, kind of like tonight." Lucas closed his eyes for a moment, like the words physically hurt him. "Tell me about her, please. What was her name?" "Helen," Catherine said. "Helen Harper. She was beautiful and kind, and she loved music more than anything. She used to sing to us every night, even when we were hungry and cold. She said music was magic. She said it could reach people's hearts when nothing else could." As Catherine spoke, she watched Lucas's face change. First confusion, then recognition, then something that looked like complete devastation. His hands started shaking. His breathing became quick and shallow. "Helen Harper," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Helen, oh God, Helen." He looked at the girls again, really looked at them, and Catherine saw understanding flood into his eyes. He was seeing something he hadn't seen before, something that made his face crumple with grief. "Your mother," Lucas said, his voice shaking. "Helen. She had black hair, didn't she? And deep brown eyes. And she sang like an angel." Catherine nodded, confused. "Yes. How did you know?" Lucas put his hand over his mouth, and Catherine could see tears streaming down his face now. This powerful man was crying in front of hundreds of people, and he didn't seem to care. "I knew her," Lucas whispered. "I knew your mother. Helen was the love of my life." The words struck Catherine like lightning. She stared at Lucas, trying to understand what he was saying. "Years ago," Lucas continued, his voice rough with emotion, "Helen and I were together. We loved each other so much. But my father, he didn't think she was good enough for our family. He said she was too poor, that she would ruin my future. He did everything he could to destroy her career as a singer, to make sure we couldn't be together." Lucas wiped his eyes, but more tears kept falling. "I tried to fight for him. I tried to find her, but my father told me she had moved away, that she wanted nothing to do with me. I didn't know. I never knew." His voice broke completely. "I never knew she was pregnant. I never knew I had daughters." Catherine felt the world spin around her. Christine grabbed her arm, holding on tight. You're our father?" Catherine whispered. Lucas looked at them, his face full of love and grief and regret all mixed together. "I think I am. Yes, I think I must be." He reached out slowly, carefully, and touched their faces with gentle hands. "You look just like her. You have her eyes, her beautiful eyes." He took a shuddering breath. "Tell me what happened to her, please. I need to know." So Catherine told him. She told him about how they'd lived in one small room with broken windows, how Mama worked 3 jobs but it was never enough, how Mama would go hungry so they could eat, how she got weaker and weaker until one night on a freezing cold Christmas Eve 5 years ago, Mama took them into an alley to shield them from the wind. "She wrapped herself around us," Catherine said, tears streaming down her face now. "She sang to us and told us she loved us. She told us to never give up. And then when we woke up in the morning, she was cold. She wasn't breathing anymore. She died protecting us from the cold." Lucas made a sound like a wounded animal. He pulled both girls into his arms, hugging them tight, his whole body shaking with sobs. "I'm so sorry," he kept saying over and over. "I'm so sorry. If I had known, if I had only known, I would have moved heaven and earth to find you. I would have given you everything. You should never have suffered like this. Never." The audience was completely silent now. Catherine could hear people sniffling, could see women wiping their eyes with handkerchiefs. Even some of the orchestra members were crying. Lucas finally pulled back, holding the girls at arm's length, looking at them with eyes full of fierce love. "You said your mother taught you to sing," he said, his voice still shaky but stronger now. "You said you wanted to perform in exchange for food." Catherine nodded. "Then that's exactly what you're going to do," Lucas said. "Not for food, not because you're begging, but because you are my daughters, because your mother's blood runs through your veins, because you deserve to be heard." He stood up and turned to face the audience. When he spoke, his voice rang out clear and strong. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to meet my daughters, Catherine and Christine. They have come here tonight not as beggars, but as artists. Their mother was Helen Harper, the most talented singer I have ever known, and she taught these girls everything she knew before she died." He turned back to the girls and smiled, a real genuine smile full of pride and love. "Will you sing for us?" he asked. "Will you show everyone what your mother taught you?" Catherine looked at Christine. Her sister's eyes were wide and full of tears, but she nodded. Together they stood. Lucas helped them up and guided them to the piano. The theater was so quiet Catherine could hear her own heartbeat. She sat down at the piano bench, Christine standing beside her. She looked out at all those people in their expensive clothes, sitting in their comfortable seats. Just minutes ago they'd been laughing at her and Christine, treating them like trash. But now they were silent, waiting, ready to listen. Catherine placed her hands on the piano keys. They were still a little wet, but she didn't care anymore. She thought about Mama, about all those nights Mama sang to them, about the love in Mama's voice, about the promise she'd made to never give up. And now, somehow impossibly, they had found their father. They weren't alone anymore. Catherine pressed the first key, and a clear, pure note rang out through the theater. Then she began to play. The song started soft and gentle, like a whisper in the darkness. Catherine's fingers moved across the keys with a grace that seemed impossible for a 10-year-old child who'd learned to play on a broken piano in an abandoned warehouse. But this wasn't just practice. This was memory. This was love. Every note carried the weight of 5 years of suffering, of hunger and cold and loneliness. Every chord held the memory of their mother's voice, singing to them on nights when they had nothing else. Christine began to sing, her voice starting quiet and trembling but growing stronger with each word. "When the night is dark and cold, and you feel so all alone, remember that you're loved, my dear. You'll always have a home." The words were simple, but the way Christine sang them made them sound like they held all the truth in the world. Her voice was clear and pure, exactly like their mother's voice had been. Catherine joined in, singing harmony while still playing, and the two voices wove together like golden threads, creating something beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. "Close your eyes and you will see, I'm right there beside you still. My love will keep you warm and safe. It always has, it always will." In the audience, people sat frozen in their seats. The woman who'd been laughing just minutes before now had tears streaming down her face. A man in the front row was gripping his wife's hand, his eyes fixed on the stage. Even the orchestra members, who'd seen thousands of performances, stood watching with their mouths slightly open. This wasn't a professional performance with perfect technique and years of training. This was something else entirely. This was raw emotion. This was truth. This was two children singing about loss and love and survival. And every person in that theater could feel it in their bones. Lucas stood at the side of the stage, tears pouring down his face, not even trying to hide them anymore. He watched his daughters, perform the song their mother had taught them, and it felt like Helen was there with them, singing through them, showing him everything he'd missed. Catherine's fingers danced faster now, the music building in intensity. Christine's voice grew stronger, more confident, hitting notes that seemed to pierce straight through to people's hearts. "Though I'm gone, I'm not far away. I live on in your every song. And when you sing, you'll feel me near. My love for you is still so strong." The piano melody swelled, filling every corner of the massive theater. Catherine played with her eyes closed now, completely lost in the music, feeling her mother's hands guiding hers, hearing her mother's voice mixing with Christine's. Christine sang the final verse with such power and emotion that it seemed impossible it was coming from such a small, fragile girl. "So when the world is cruel and cold, and hope seems far away, remember you are loved, my dears, and I'm with you every day." The music began to slow, the notes becoming softer, gentler, like a lullaby putting a child to sleep. Catherine played the final chord, a rich, beautiful sound that hung in the air for a long moment before slowly fading into silence. For several seconds, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The theater was so quiet that Catherine could hear her own heartbeat. Then, from the back of the theater, someone began to clap. It was slow at first, just one person's hands coming together. Then another person joined, then another, and another. Within moments, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding so loudly it sounded like thunder. People were cheering, crying, shouting bravo over and over again. But this applause was different from the applause that had greeted Jackson and Madame Esther earlier. That applause had been polite, expected, automatic. This applause was real. It came from deep inside people's chests, from their hearts, from a place of genuine emotion. Women were openly sobbing. Men were wiping their eyes. Even the workers backstage were clapping, some of them crying too. Catherine and Christine stood at the piano, holding hands, looking out at all those people. They didn't know what to do. They'd never experienced anything like this before. Lucas walked onto the stage and put his arms around both girls, pulling them close. He was still crying, his whole body shaking with sobs, but he was also smiling, the biggest, brightest smile Catherine had ever seen. "That was beautiful," he whispered to them, his voice choked with emotion. "Your mother would have been so proud. I am so proud." The applause continued, wave after wave of sound washing over the stage. People were standing on their seats now, clapping until their hands must have hurt. Finally, Lucas turned to face the audience. He raised his hand and slowly the applause began to quiet down. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lucas said, his voice still shaky but strong enough to carry through the theater, "thank you. Thank you for truly listening, for truly seeing these children for who they are." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I need to tell you all something I just learned tonight myself." The audience leaned forward, curious. "These girls, Catherine and Christine, are my daughters. Their mother was Helen Harper, a woman I loved more than life itself. A woman my father drove away because he thought she wasn't good enough for our family. A woman who died alone, protecting these children from the cold, while I never even knew they existed." Gasps rippled through the audience. People whispered to each other, shocked by this revelation. Lucas continued, his voice getting stronger. "For 5 years, my daughters have lived on the streets, homeless, hungry, alone. They came here tonight not to cause trouble, but simply to ask for a chance to earn some food by sharing the gift their mother gave them, the gift of music." He looked down at Catherine and Christine, his eyes full of love and pain. And what did they receive? Mockery, cruelty, violence. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Many people looked ashamed now, remembering how they'd laughed. But despite all of that, Lucas said, they still sang, they still shared their mother's song, they still showed us what real art is. Not perfect technique or expensive training, but honest emotion, real feeling, truth. He turned to look directly at where Jackson and Madame Esther had been standing. "I fired Desmond Jackson and Madame Esther tonight. Some of you might think that was a mistake. You might think I'm throwing away talented performers. But I would rather have artists who have compassion than artists who have cruelty. I would rather have music that touches hearts than music that's simply technically perfect." The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. "These are my daughters," Lucas said, his voice ringing with pride and determination. "Catherine and Christine Williams. And from this day forward, they will never be hungry again. They will never be cold again. They will never be alone again." He knelt down and looked into both girls' eyes. "Will you come home with me? Will you let me be your father? Will you let me give you everything I should have given you from the day you were born?" Catherine felt like her heart might burst. She looked at Christine and her sister was crying, but this time they were happy tears. "Yes," Catherine whispered. Then louder, "Yes. Yes," Christine said, throwing her arms around Lucas's neck. Lucas pulled them both close, holding them tight, and the audience erupted in applause again. This time even louder than before, full of joy and approval. Catherine buried her face in Lucas's shoulder, feeling his warmth, feeling his arms around her, feeling safe for the first time in 5 years. She thought about Mama, about how Mama had always said that music could reach people's hearts, about how Mama had said they were special. Mama had been right about everything. As the applause continued to wash over them, Catherine felt something she hadn't felt since the night Mama died. Hope, real, genuine hope that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. What would you have done in Catherine's place? Would you have had the courage to step onto that stage? In the months that followed, Catherine and Christine's lives transformed completely. Lucas enrolled them in the best schools, hired the best music teachers, and made sure they had everything they needed. Not just material things, but love, support, and encouragement. The girls excelled in their music studies, their natural talent now nurtured by proper training. But they never forgot where they came from. They never forgot the cold nights, the hunger, the kindness of strangers who'd helped them, or the cruelty of those who'd turned them away. Lucas established a charity in Helen's name, helping homeless children and supporting struggling musicians. Catherine and Christine performed at fundraisers, using their voices to help others the way they'd once needed help. The story of the twin homeless girls who sang at the Williams Theater spread throughout the city and beyond. People talked about it for years, about the night when 2 cold, hungry children showed a wealthy audience what really mattered, about the night when cruelty turned to compassion, about the night when a father found his daughters. And whenever Catherine and Christine performed, they always ended with the same song, the lullaby their mother had taught them, the song that had saved their lives, the song that had brought them home. They sang it for Helen, for Lucas, for every child who'd ever felt alone in the cold. And their voices, filled with love and memory and hope, reached hearts in ways that perfect technique never could. Because, as their mother had always said, music wasn't about being perfect. It was about being honest. It was about touching souls. It was about love that never dies, even when everything else is lost. And that kind of music, true music, could change the world. Do you believe in destiny, or was this all coincidence? Could Catherine and Christine's song have reached Lucas's heart if he hadn't lost Helen? Or was their reunion written in the stars from the moment Helen first sang to her unborn daughters? If you think this story was unbelievable, wait till you hear what happened in our next story. Subscribe to True Spark Stories for more timeless tales that will touch your heart and keep you thinking long after the video ends. Because every person you pass on the street has a story. Every voice deserves to be heard. And sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most broken places.